What's going on, everybody? It's the Knucklehead Network. Welcome to a special Saturday edition. We got the one and only Sarah Webb from the UK to join us. And she just finished publishing and releasing and drawing and writing her first comic, and the issue's out now on Amazon. I'm gonna let you say the title because I'm a but yes, it is here. She is finally here. We've been doing this for months trying to get her on here. Finally got her on here. How you doing? Welcome
Hi,
to the show.
everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for having me. And the title is Knave of Hearts. So look out for it on Amazon.
That's right.
I was wondering if there was an accent with that knaves. I'm like, is it knaves? Hearts? Knives?
It's from a nursery rhyme. The Knave of Hearts stole the tarts. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
No.
There's like I think, is it Sing a Song? But I can't remember. But the line I remembered was the Knave of Hearts, he stole the tarts and took them clean away or something. And that's kind of where it comes from. And also because in a deck of cards, the jack can also be called a knave.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where the title comes from.
Got you. Thank you. I was a little. I'm like, I see his face. He's like, we don't want to get it wrong. We gotta.
Yes.
We don't want to disrespect.
I would have never said knave.
See, I know my boy, so I'm like, let's help him.
Yeah, it was nearly called Jack of Hearts, but Marvel released a comic series called Jack of Hearts back in the 80s. And I didn't want to compete with that. And if you look at the cover, he wears some super lycra sort of pinks and greens and stuff. And I was like, that's like a whole different aesthetic. I am going to leave that with Marvel.
Yeah. So we got the cover of your comic here, and I also put in the YouTube chat the link to get your comic on Amazon.
Thank you so much. So yeah, there it is in all its glory. And it again, because I finished that cover art probably 8-9 months ago. So every time it pops up, I'm like, oh yeah, I drew that.
And as you were doing this, two questions really. One, what was the whole inspiration for this project? And two, what was the hardest part that you found in doing this whole thing?
I'll tackle the first one first. So the inspiration was so I used to, before I had my daughter, I would do sort of little just 1-page strips, usually with no text. It would always be just the art. So like, a really simple sequence of like, I think one was I used to draw a character called Little Gothic Mouse, and he would get himself into sticky situations. And the first one that got published was he didn't want to wake up, a rooster called, so he pulled out a gun and blew the rooster to bits. And that was it was just little skit pages, I guess you'd call it, like that. I started working in video games, doing sort of concept art and like in-game art just for a little indie studio. And I think because I was doing art all day for work, I didn't want to do it when I got home. So I carried on loving reading comics, but I stopped doing any kind of strips. And then COVID happened, and I decided to entertain myself and my friends and family by writing letters, like traditional letters. And I'd write because I'm like rubbish. I'm like, people don't care that today I ate a grape, or it's COVID, nothing's happening. I'll make stories up. I'll make up stories. But what I would do is I would write a chapter, post that chapter to a friend, and they'd write the next chapter, and then they'd post it back, and we started doing that. And I was like, I actually really like writing stories, and I like drawing. And in the middle of that, I started listening to a band called Esoterica, who are a real prog, I think ethereal metal. I think I'm a bit fuzzy on what genre they kind of pop themselves into, but I really liked their music. And I drew just a panel of a couple of band members, and they had like a little tour story of one of them picked up a coconut when they were out on tour just randomly, and that coconut kind of followed them on tour. And I drew just like a 1-panel thing, and the band actually liked the panel on Instagram, and I was like, maybe I'm all right doing this. Like, it's been a long time, and maybe I should sit down and try and write a story. And it was initially like the version 1 of the sort of script that I wrote was a lot more sort of Esoterica fan comic. And then I sort of sat down and said, actually, I want to write something that I am going to love drawing, that I can build like a whole world around and just like immerse myself in it. So that kind of turned into the proper version of Knave of Hearts Part 1. And yeah, then I just carried on drawing and suddenly I had a book. So that was kind of inspirational. And I've now clean forgotten what the hardest bit. Bit is probably the self-promotion piece for me. If I could live in the perfect world, I would write and draw the comics, and I would kind of slip it under the door and let other people just kind of go, oh yeah, this is quite good, as opposed to actually having to like come up with interesting blog posts for my Patreon, because I've got a Patreon, and shout out to my patrons who I couldn't have gotten this far without them. But like coming up with blog post content, coming up with content to put on all the comic book Facebook groups that I'm in, which have been an invaluable source of information. I've made such good contacts through it, but doing that kind of stuff doesn't come naturally. I don't like going, look what I did, look what I did. I more like to go, the thing I did is over there and you might be interested. And if you want to go and like, but don't worry. So I find actually doing this sort of stuff really difficult, and like I find it much easier to sit and draw quietly by myself with music on, than to kind of put myself out there with a look at me, look at what I did. Yeah, that's the hardest bit for me.
I understand that completely. That would have been my answer as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But since the self-promotion is a little bit hard, let me do a little bit of promotion for you. A funny story with this. When we first got the email, I resigned myself, like, all right, we're going to get one issue. I'll read it over. Got done with the first part of it. I was like, all right, cool. I mean, I was going to start writing down some stuff for this interview. Then I was like, oh, wait, there's a second part. So I read the second part. When the second part ended and I saw that the next volume's coming out next year, I got a little angry because I was like, but now I'm invested. I was like, when it was one issue, I would, read it, just to get the gist of it. Second part, fully invested now. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Well, I actually I don't know if I hold it, if people will be able to see, but I'm working. This is issue 2 in progress. So when I'm not working my full-time job, I'm usually found either parenting my child or drawing my comic. Those are the kind of the 3 things in my life, really. So I'm working on it. I will say that I think I learned a lot of lessons from issue 1, it being my first sort of proper comic that I've put out. So I'm actually enjoying the story more in issue 2, because issue 1 still had that slight homage to Esoterica, which is great. But when you're basing characters on real people, because they are all real people, I've met them all. They've actually helped me with like tidbits of information about how their band kind of work and their dynamic. Issue 2 starts to separate a little bit from the real people and more into the world of the gods. And that's where my imagination can go bananas. And that means that I think issue 1 is a great intro, but issue 2, you start to get into the dynamics of the gods, which I think is just, for me, that's the bit I'm excited about. So I'm excited about issue 2. Issue 1 was like my learning curve.
Well, like I said, it was a great curve because I was instantly hooked. And now I can't wait for volume 2, for 3, 4, however many you do. I'm going to be there for each and every one of them.
This is my long-term project. I think I've got enough of a story arc for at least another 5 or 6 issues. Oh. And then that's just one of the story arcs, because this is what I liked about this comic book, is that I got to build a universe. And because I can build a universe, a bit like the MCU, you don't, I've got one story arc, but actually there could be 4 or 5 other ones that I can either go. I'm not a massive fan of prequels, just in movies or stuff, but tangent storylines, or you follow the story of the Knave, but a bit like in a deck of cards, there's the Queen of Hearts is obviously in there, and maybe I can tell a story with her, or I can go off with the King of Spades, or because each god is basically named after a face card in a deck of cards, and then all the number cards are your seraphim, your angel-y type beings within my world. Yeah. So I've got a full deck of cards to play with. So
no, seriously.
Yeah, excited about that.
and without trying to give any of the story away, but when the maid was introduced, and you see, and she starts explaining what's happening and what the coconut's purpose is and all that stuff, it's like you can open up about different versions of that story being told, and you know the different. I don't want to give away the shit, but you know the different maids out there, if you if you will, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like all the different housekeepers and like because the universe, I have set it in like a casino hotel, like, you know, I don't know whether I'm giving too much away, but what the hey, but things like death, that's the doorman of the hotel. They let people in and out.
Yeah.
So like, you know, I've got a story in my head about the doormen, who are essentially the Grim Reapers, and like some of the interaction that they've got with the god characters that I've built. And, you know, I've got all this stuff buzzing, and it's like, the enemy to every artist, I think, is time. And I think that is my current enemy, is I just need time, preferably infinite time and no sleep ever again. And then I've got a chance of getting this all out of my head, like, you know, before I'm too old to draw, because my fingers have all like curled up.
And do you find that when inspiration strikes, do you have to like write it down immediately, or are you good with remembering it for later on?
I'm usually pretty good, but I have to get it down at some point. So I've my house is full of notebooks. My poor husband, he puts up with a lot of rubbish, and my notebooks are one of them. And I'm a bit of a sucker for stationery. So quite often I've had a really good idea, but which notebook did I put it in? Or if it's a drawing, like if I've had a picture of a character in my head and I've drawn it down, oh God, which sketchbook was that in? Is quite a common problem for me. But the sort of the sort of meat and potatoes, the main element of the story, that tends to sit in my head, and it won't go until I finished the page. Like issue 1 went round and round and round my brain until the book was done. And then it was like, okay, oh thank God. But then it was like, but then we have all the new stuff for issue 2, and now that's what's going round and round in my brain, and I need to get it down so that it can go out there into the world.
Does it ever stop? Yikes.
No, probably not.
What's next?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I look back now, because obviously for 10 years I had comics in my life to read but not to draw, and I'm like, what was I doing? And then I was like, oh yeah, I was drawing and playing a lot of PlayStation, and bringing up a small person, so that does take up quite a lot of time. But now she's old enough that she's starting to not want to spend time with us quite so much, so yes, I've got some more free time back, and I think, yeah, that's it. I've just about got the balance, I think.
So when you're thinking of a story, is it like a complete story and then you break it into parts, or are you thinking about just this particular issue and then the next issue you think about it?
Oh, no, my brain is probably 3 or 4 issues ahead.
Okay.
So once I've written the story down and I'm happy with it, I will start immediately thinking about the next part, or the lore that kind of builds behind the story. So there's a lot of stuff that I've written down that will probably never actually go into the comics, but I need to write it down so that when I am writing what a character would do in a certain scenario, I can go back to that lore that I've written about that character and be like, okay, so based on what's happened to them in the past, how are they going to react? What are they going to do? And I find that quite helpful when I'm story building. But normally the sort of the bulk of the story, it just sort of spills out. And I will handwrite it as well. So I type it up afterwards for safety and so that I can mess around with it. But I will sit and I will write out the whole story in my notebook over a couple of weeks to kind of, because I don't know, that just seems to be how my brain likes to get it out initially. And then I'll read it back, and then I'm half the time like, oh. Yeah, I'm not sure I was entirely with it when I was writing that section, but that's okay. I'll type it up and then I can start to butcher it. And when I write it out, I write it all out sort of long form. So when I put it into like Word or what have you, I can then split it out into pages and panels to kind of bring a bit of structure back into it, because otherwise it just reads like a bizarre short story. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever played D&D or if you know what Dungeons and Dragons is.
I really want to though. I
think
my friends and I bought Pathfinder and we gave it a go, but I think because it was 3 people who had no idea what they were doing and the manual was like that thick, and we were just like,
No.
This is a very slow game.
Yeah.
Maybe D&D E5 would be a little easier. It is definitely a little easier for newer players because it's a little less complicated. But the way you explained how you have lore for a character that doesn't even need to be used so you can bring it in motivation later, that's exactly what we do. Like I have my character that I'm playing now, because I have he had a whole life before this that I can draw upon for different inspiration for different things. So hearing that you actually went that deep is cool, because I don't think it's necessarily like an obvious thing that a writer would have to go that far to come up with a motivation. I think sometimes it looks like on the surface, the writer's just, well, in this moment, this is what I'm going to do. But to hear that you went that deep actually lends, I don't know if credence is the right word, but as a reader, knowing that you took that time, it makes the experience even more enjoyable, because now everything was crafted with care, is what I'm trying to say.
And I think in the next issue, more of that lore building comes in because I've needed it more. Whereas I think because issue 1, most of the characters, or a chunk of the characters, are real people who I've met in real life. I've been able to ask them questions like, what would you do in this scenario, type thing. So it was kind of like cheat. But whereas the next book, which they do still feature in, but it is more about, you start to learn more of the behind the scenes of what's going on. And that's where I'm sort of falling back on. And it's not just kind of what would the character do, because each deck of each god is based on an ancient god. I've also started to do my research on ancient Roman gods, ancient Greek gods and stuff, to kind of see if there's things I can nab from history that I can kind of do clever nods to, because I love a clever nod. Like, one of my big influences is like Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore, I've forgotten her name, but the lady that does the Lore Olympus webtoon. Like, there are really clever nods in all of their work to either history, current events, things that have happened in other comics that are kind of related. And I love that sort of stuff. It's just like my inner dweeb goes, yes. And I want people to start to feel that as my series expands, that there are clever nods to things where, like, I'm not a scholar, but I know that the god Dionysus, who's the god of like wine and parties, I can see that this is probably Dionysus. Like, I've not named that god Dionysus, because there'll be like Knave of Hearts, Queen of Hearts, King of Hearts, Ace of Hearts type thing, but I can see that that's who that's personifying. Yeah, I think that's the word. So yeah, so I like dweebing out about all this sort of stuff. So and I hope to bring that dweebiness into my comics.
I got a quick question for you about what you were saying. Do you authors, like, I heard you say you write a lot of stuff that you don't use?
Yes.
Do you like build, like, maybe put it to the side, the stuff that you don't use, and then maybe later on come back and maybe put it together to build another comic? Or
I think I would. I mean, it's because this comic is so time intensive, because like a Looney Tunes, I'm the penciler, the inker, the colorer, the letterer, the author. And like, I had so many problems getting the page sizes right for print. Like, I don't want to talk about it. It was traumatic. I think because I'm one of these people where when I'm doing something 100%. So if I have ideas for other comics, they have to go in a notebook, because I can't look at them right now until what I'm doing or what I'm focusing on is done. That is like a side quest. And if I do the side quest, the main quest is never going to get done. So I think where it's other comic ideas, yes, but and it's one of those where sometimes, like, because I'm a bit I'll be 100%, but if I get bored, I have to walk away and do something else. And normally it's the PlayStation, or I do archery. So I like going down the woods with my bow and arrow and shooting plastic animals because I find that therapeutic. I got a new bow the other week, and I am one of these sad people that names my bow. So my original bow was David Bowie, and my new bow is Mr. Bojangles. So Mr. Bojangles, and my husband shoots as well. We go down the local field archery, which is like this really pretty woods, and go and shoot plastic animals. Anyway, I can't remember how I got onto that. But yeah, so like I have to have that was it, other things to distract me, circling back. And so if they're written down, if I need a break away from this project, which has happened a couple of times, I need to go away and draw something completely different, unrelated. Otherwise, I become this like strange sort of hermit lady that only mumbles about like decks of cards, and people start to like go, I don't think I want to be your friend anymore. So I will go and work on something else. And again, it might be that sits in like a little folder somewhere and it doesn't see the light of day ever, but I'll have learned something from it. Or it might be, oh, I can nick some of my own ideas from that and pull it into this. So I think there's never any harm in having lots of sort of splattergun projects all over the place and the many notebooks, unless you lose track of where you put the thing that you're looking for. I'm a bit of a bugger for that. I'm a bit of a bugger for many, like when I draw digitally, I'm one of these people, I don't label my layers. I don't know if any of you guys have ever drawn digitally. Yeah, but like 64 layers, and there's like layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4. And I'm like, oh God, I need to change that. And you have to go through and sort of turn off each layer in turns, like, where is it? And that I think describes my creative process quite well. It's like I start out with the best intentions of being really organized and stuff, and it just ends up scattered everywhere.
I know how you feel. I'm the guy with layer 1, copy layer 1, 2, copy layer 1, 3.
Exactly, just because you're like, oh, well, if I just create another quick layer here, then I can like diddle with that, and if I don't like it, I can just delete it. And then I'm like, oh God, which layer was it on? But I use Clip Studio Art, which does allow you to put layers in folders, which you would have thought would help, but just means it's like, oh no, which folder is it in? And then which layer is it in?
Two.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I do most of the thumbnails. Like, all right, I gotta hide this, and then when you need it for the next one, it's like, shit, where is it? Because it just says image 862. I'm like, all right, now we're gonna have this every image.
I probably have put out issue 2 by now if I'd been more organized with my layers, but sorry, gang.
It's funny, the whole thing. When I was going to school for digital art, in class, every layer was well titled, it was organized, I had everything, all my homework projects there, and then the minute I was done, I was like, all right, never need that again.
Yeah, when I worked in video games and I used to have to work in layers in Photoshop, I got such a rollicking for kind of being so disorganized that I did become quite anal about it. But yeah, as soon as I stopped working in video games, it was like, I'm free. Layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, layer 5. Woo, layers!
Yeah, because it's like we're not concerned with the layer names. We're trying to get the picture done, and then it bites us in the ass. You know, at the end.
And I think as I've got more experience, so with the issue 1, I think every page probably had about 95 layers. With issue 2, I'm managing on about 4 layers a panel, which, like, you know, I think again it means my process is probably getting a little bit tidier the more experience I get. But yeah, it's still I don't think any other, if I was to send this to another artist to do some work on, I think there's a reason I need to work on this comic by myself.
I was gonna ask, what is more difficult, writing the comic or drawing the comic?
Drawing takes longer and more thought, because particularly if it's something I've not drawn before, like if it's a perspective I've not drawn before, or a particular type of costume, that's more labor intensive. The writing I find fairly easy, but I find with art I'm fairly like blasé. If I need to redraw a page, it's like, well, okay, I'll redraw a page. If I have to rewrite a section of the book, because I read it back and I'm like, oh god, I was obviously had too many gins at this point. I find that harder to correct my writing than I do to correct my art, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the thing I find the hardest is trying to be a content creator on top of it. Like the self-promotion piece, as I said before, is that's by far the hardest bit. The actual creating the content, because I love doing it. Even the bits that maybe I'm like when stuff comes back from your editor and he's like, I don't know where this grammar is from, but it's not the English language. And you're like, oh, sad. That can be kind of like a bit sort of like, okay, I'll rewrite it. But I've been really lucky. My editor was very good and he was very kind through the whole process. So I think I got off fairly easy.
Thanks. I want to say you are amazing because you writing, you're drawing, you're promoting. Like just from this for show, just putting a video out is, I know this man goes through a lot. So for you to do every single, I was gonna ask. That's why I was writing down the questions. Is it normal for the actual author to do everything?
No, I think I've made a rod for my own back. No, I think it's normally you would have. I know that if you are an author artist, normally you will hire a letterer because in fact I think I've got the book behind me. I had to, because I had no idea what I was doing when it comes to lettering, but this book was really helpful. But I've had to sort of teach myself how to do it as I've been doing it. And no, I know that people do it, and I have a newfound respect for those people, having now done it myself. But I'm also a bit of a control freak, so I don't think I would be able to work. Like, I wouldn't be able to write and have someone else draw it because they wouldn't have drawn what was in my head when I was writing it. And I think I'd struggle to draw someone else's writing because I'd want to draw it how it is in my head. And if they didn't like it, there would this is where like my career in being a comic book artist is like dead in the water, because I'm like, sorry, artists, like other writers, I will not work with you. I probably would, but I think I'd struggle more. It wouldn't be enjoyment for me. Whereas when it's my own stuff, like if I need to pivot or change something, the only person I'm bickering with is myself.
Yeah.
So I think for me it's probably easier because of the way I am and the way I create and my control freak nature. Whereas I can see the benefit in having someone that writes, someone that pencils, someone that inks, someone that colors, like, the more traditional kind of team you'd have for putting a comic book together. I can see the benefit in that, and it can sometimes be quite lonely doing it all yourself. Like, so when I only brought my editor in back in, I think it was January, when the book was basically done, and it was like, here is my basically done stuff and here is the script, which actually, because I'd made so many changes as I was doing the art, I had to rewrite the script so that it matched what was in the actual comic for him to be able to look at. And I did kind of think, I probably should have got like other people involved a bit earlier on, but whatevs. And I've decided to do exactly what I did for issue 1 for issue 2, which is basically finish the book, then take it to an editor, because at that point I won't mind fiddling with it. But yeah, I did find sometimes it was like, I don't know what I'm doing. There's no one else on this project I can ask. Oh, well, sleeves up. Let's just see what happens. And I think it's why I am quite blasé about it, because it does feel like I've just sort of farted out this comic book after a year of like intense labor with not a Scoobies about what I'm doing.
But that's the best way to learn. Because even with like video creation or editing and all that, one of the rules that the people that I look, that help us out, it goes, it's better to be finished than perfect.
Yeah.
Because if you're thinking it's perfect, you're never going to be done with it.
Nope.
So
absolutely
put it out now, and then the next one could get better, and it could get better after that, and better after that. It's like when you don't allow yourself to make those little mistakes, you can't get better at it. So just get what you have, let it go, and then if it's good, you can make it better. If it doesn't do as good as you want, then you know where to pivot and change. What you did wrong.
And I guess I'm a bit unusual in that I'm not doing this for commercial gain. Like, if it makes a bit of money, fab, whatever, that will pay for me doing more on the next issue. I'm not sort of money chasing, which for me has made it easier, because like if I sell like 3 copies, I have sold more than 3 copies already, but if let's say I'd only sold 3 copies, but then I got a review on Amazon which was like, this book changed my life, which Comic Con are you going to? I'm going to cosplay, blah blah blah. That would be success for me. So I think taking the pressure off the sort of, and I know a lot of people don't have the luxury to do that. I mean, I've got a full-time job, so this comic doesn't pay the bills, so I'm in a really sort of lovely position. I mean, it's not lovely in that like I have a full-time job, so I don't produce the work as quickly as I'd like to, but I'm not kind of reliant on it to pay the bills. It's kind of, if it makes money, that's more money I can plow into the next issue. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. And if it doesn't make any money, but a select few people read it and enjoy it, I've done a good job. And I like, that makes me happy. That gives me the happy buzz. Like, I'm not saying like, if someone was like, we want to buy the TV rights and here's £1 million, then I would be like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I feel right with that.
Take it.
Yeah. But that's not my motivator. And I think a lot of people can get in the trap of I'm putting this out to make money. And that I think can mean if you then don't make the money, it feels like a failure. Whereas as I said, I'm in that blessed position to be kind of, look, as long as the people who do read it enjoy it, or if they don't enjoy it, just don't tell me about it. I'm happy.
No, but you definitely have something that left off in a cliffhanger and would definitely want people to have issue 2 out pretty soon.
Yeah, I promise I'm working on it.
No,
but I want the art to be, because it's all in the realm of the gods, the art is a lot more labor intensive for issue 2, because it's all going to be very decadent and like think Bridgerton type sort of decadence, and then you have to draw the little fiddly filigree stuff on everything. Yeah, I'm going as fast as I can, but yeah, I really want to get issue 2 out because I want to start working on issue 3, because I'm sick of issue 2 kind of swirling around. I just need it out there, and then issue 3 will be even more exciting because I'll have learned even more from doing issue 2, and that's what's motivating me sort of through the whole process, really.
So, alluding to what you just said there, going from issue 1 to issue 2, so far, what is the biggest thing you've learned?
Page sizes. Get your page sizes right from day one, because oh my god, if you have to resize all of your art because you've not quite understood bleed, trim, and like all the other measurements that Amazon put on their site, it's super painful. I had so many mistakes. My house is scattered with different proofs where I've tried to do different things with page sizes, and then I did all of that, submitted it, and Amazon came back and was like, actually pages blah 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 still wrong. And I was like, but how? So get your page sizes right from day one, which yes, issue 2's the page sizes are now correct. And I think spend more time on the script, because I think with issue 1 I did just kind of go bleh and then start drawing, as opposed to actually try and structure the script before I started drawing, which is fine, but I think it meant I wasted a lot of time. Also, stick with the version of how you're gonna do it from the start. So I started issue 1 as a traditionally drawn comic, so it was in an A3 pad of paper, like, pen and ink rulers, and then I got this shiny graphics tablet from my mum for Christmas, and I was like, if I move it all digitally, then I can color it, whereas I'm definitely not going to color it because I'm much slower drawing traditionally than I am drawing digitally. And I was like, I could do color. So like, make those decisions before you start, and then you don't waste a lot of time like trying to turn, like, because I took photos of all my traditionally drawn pages, brought them into Clip Studio, then ended up having to redraw them because the photograph wasn't great quality, and I wasted a good 3 or 4 months on issue 1 just messing around with that sort of stuff. But I think I needed to do it to find the thing, but I'm not having to do that with issue 2. I've got my process down. I can just crack on with getting it done. And I think that's the biggest jump for me. And then making sure that the story picks up momentum. Like, I didn't want to leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger in issue 1 and then it be a bit of a damp squib in issue 2. So I think learning to sort of write what I would find interesting to read is something that I've taken from issue 1. But I think if I hadn't done it the sort of crazy way I'd done it in issue 1, I wouldn't have learnt that for issue 2.
All right. So, going back to issue 1 here, the hotel and the way it functions, which is something I'd never thought of putting a structure like that before. Like that's pretty cool the way you did it. Where'd that come from?
I think it kind of came from, obviously, deck of cards. One of the first things you'll think of is a casino. And I had this sort of picture in my head of like, because I think the world is a very messy place generally, most of the time.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm like, look, that kind of mess only happens when you've got a project manager and a bunch of terrible subcontractors. So that's kind of how I see the gods, is they're all trying to manage something that is unmanageable. And then I was like, that's kind of like running a hotel. Like, you know, you'll have the different departments that are all trying to look after the guests, and the guests do really unexpected stuff, like trash a room, put a TV through the window, make horrible messes in the bathroom, you know, and basically the gods are trying to run around after them and keep it clean, but also try and put rules in to kind of stop guests from doing the crazy stuff. And it kind of started from there. And I think I like going to hotels and stuff just in general, because it's weird. It's a place that's not home, but you're supposed to feel safe to sleep in. And when you go to a hotel, there's always like doors you're not allowed to go in. And I'm one of these people, like, if I'm told I'm not allowed to go in, the first thing I want to do is I want to go in there. I want to go in there and I want to see what's going on. And in fact, hubby and I were at a hotel earlier this week, and we'd had a few, and we're walking around the sort of corridors, and there were like things behind curtains that I was like, oh. And I like that idea of kind of seeing behind the scenes. And I think hotels is just such an interesting place to kind of delve into, because there's so much that happens that we as guests, when we stay in a hotel, just don't see. The magic happens behind the curtain, very Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, right.
So I liked that premise, and I thought hotels, corridors, different rooms could be different worlds and different versions of the worlds. It means that my universe is almost infinite, so I have so much room to play. So that's kind of where I think it came from.
That's cool. That hearing you say that, like, as I was reading it, and they brought up that each room is a different universe and a different world, I was thinking that is such a smart idea, because you have now given yourself a playground, but the playground is well defined, and you could pull from anywhere, and it's not like, it doesn't seem like you're going to be just pulling things out of thin air.
Yeah,
you actually,
exactly.
like, the reader can figure out, okay, so this is where all this is coming from.
Yeah. It's not quite the sort of the Star Trek thing of, oh, it's another timeline. Yeah. I didn't want to have that where it was kind of like shoehorned in later when I needed to pivot with the story to keep it interesting, because I think if ever I release a comic book that's not interesting, that will be a sad day. Like, I'd rather it be kind of a bit clunky, but the premise is interesting, or there's like smart little corners to explore. And I try and put like little Easter eggs in the artwork. So in that page, actually, where it's the different I can't remember now what the words were, and I wrote it, and that's terrible, my memory's bad, but it was like the different corridor is a different universes, and each room is like a different version of each world. I quite liked that page, because the last one where it's the robots, because they're all holding babies, and the other ones, and the last one they're holding a little microchip, and it's just that sort of stuff. I love drawing that kind of silliness, because really it is very silly. It's like, babies, and there's this little robot going, microchip, that's my baby. And I think, it means I can dip into like sci-fi. I can dip into like all the genres that I love, but maybe don't quite mesh with the normal genre of the comic in a safe way that doesn't like jar with the general premise of the story. And
for anybody who's going to read it, like, one example that I think of, the flashback. Yes. When I saw the flashback, that's one of my favorites. When I saw the flashback and how it was drawn, I instantly was like, okay, that's exactly how this guy is picturing this as he's saying it.
Yeah.
Like, it just, even though it's seemingly drastically different than the rest of the images, it fits in so well, because it's like, all right, I could see this dude think this is what's going on in his head.
Yeah, well, I had like there's a particular, like, I don't know if you guys ever had like Tony Hart Art Attack over there, but there used to be a particular music track that they'd play when it was the art gallery. and I had that music in my head when I was kind of playing it, and it's like elevator music. And that's kind of when I was drawing that, I was like, you know, because it's funny, I've met the real Tobias, and I'm sure he would be far smarter than I have written him in the comic than to get into the situation he gets everybody in. But I was like, but I have to inject a bit of myself into all these characters, because otherwise, like, you know, I'm going to be a little bit too constrained. And so I was like, if I were Tobias in this situation, what would my head do? And I have it frequently where I'm like thinking back about something that I did that was probably a terrible idea. There is elevator music playing in my head. It's like, do, 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 do. Oh, look, there she's doing it. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. So like, yeah, I like to vanish into my own little like pockets of insanity when I'm drawing those sorts of pages. But I loved drawing that page. Was the easiest page. It was so much fun to draw. I was so happy with my crayon.
No, it looked fun though. We have some questions in the chat here. I don't know if you want to. I believe you mentioned some earlier, but it goes, when it comes to creating your stories, is there elements that you like to pick out from different literature and inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of said, so Neil Gaiman is like I'd say a big influence. Like, it's funny, I maybe I love his comic stuff more than his sort of actual novels, although his novels are very good. This is not like, if Neil Gaiman, if you ever see this, I'm not dissing your novels. Your novels are very good, but your comics are chef's kiss. I read a lot of fantasy books. Like, to get to sleep, I have to be reading. And actually, I can't read comics to sleep, because then I don't sleep. I stay up and read the comics. I sort of will read things like... there's an author called Mercedes Lackey, I think her name is, and her books are a really gentle read, but they're really well written. And so I read everything. Basically, if you give me a book, I'm probably going to read it. There's very little I won't read. So I'm always kind of like, I think my brain sort of likes to store up like, that's a clever plot twist, or, oh, that's an interesting way that character's been written, or, you know, like, I love a villain that's not really a villain. So books that have got that sort of thing in, where, like, a bit like Thanos, like, where you're like, you're evil, but I get where you're coming from. And there are times I'd like to click my finger and make half the people in the room I'm in just vanish. That does happen. So, like, I think the more you ingest from authors and other comic book artists, the more you give yourself tools that you might not necessarily register that you're either emulating or being influenced by. But I think only good things can happen from kind of looking at other sort of people in literature. And I think visually, I get that with like films and TV shows that I watch. Like, I have found myself now sort of, there'll be a scene playing and I'd be like, oh, that's the bit I would, that's the sort of the still I would use to kind of do that, and then that's the still that would follow. So I think like gaining influence from that sort of stuff has been really invaluable. So yes, read, kids. It's good for you.
Wait, I'm just curious. Where do you suggest I start with Neil Gaiman? I've heard you mention him twice.
See, my absolute favorite is Death, the High Cost of Living. I actually read that before I read Sandman, which is what he's sort of known for. I mean, the Sandman comics, and if you've watched the Netflix show, they are they're sort of the same and they're different, but you should treat them as two separate things. Like, I love the show and I love the comic, but they've obviously, because you physically can't completely translate any book into TV. But yeah, I would say if you were to read Death, the High Cost of Living, and I think now that the Sandman books are kind of back in vogue, you can buy like I don't know if I can commit. There's nobody down here. I was going to say I've got the sort of I think it's just called Death. Charming. And I think it's like a book that's got all of the death related stories from the Sandman series. But yeah, Death, the High Cost of Living, I think that was the comic book that kind of changed how I saw comics when I first read it, because I'd read like V for Vendetta, I'd read Watchmen at the time, I'd read The League of Gentlemen, I'd read Asterix and Obelix comics growing up, but Death, the High Cost of Living was the first time that I was like, oh, it doesn't have to be superheroes and it can still be brilliant. And I think that kind of, because I love superhero stuff, but my jam is the sort of the gothic-y, the dark kind of underbelly of comics. Not horror, because I'm a bit of a weenie and I don't like blood and gore, and I get scared easily. So it was kind of, oh, there are other types of story out there that are for me, that I can enjoy this. And yeah, like I read the odd Spider-Man, I read the odd like Batman and stuff, because they are brilliant. Like, you know, they're just not my cup of tea. My cup of tea is the sort of the Sandman type books, or Monstrous is a series I'm really enjoying at the moment, or Saga, or I used to read some comics that are by another author writer called Roman Dirge, and I think it was quite big in the 90s, but he wrote a series of comics called Lenore, and they're so funny and they're so dark and I love them so much. And so I'd say Neil Gaiman, definitely start Death of the High Cost of Living, because if you don't like that, Sandman's probably not for you. But if you do like it, obviously the Sandman series. And then if you like a bit more humor in your comics, Lenore is a really good series to get stuck into.
Awesome.
They're my top tips.
Awesome.
So the idea of the gods and all that you came up with, I saw that, and it's kind of refreshing, because you know you make mention to how some people are actual beings and other ones are not as important, you know, without trying to give away the first issue.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Is that something that you had in your head that was like, this is a cool concept, or did you expand on something you saw?
I think it's sort of the particularly the like having the face cards as gods is kind of, that was like a flash moment. But basically when I was growing up, my family used to play cards a lot. So we'd normally play like whist, rummy, sevens, snap, any game you could play with a deck of cards. Basically that was like family holidays, a deck of cards went everywhere, and when everyone had enough, I usually hadn't had enough, and so I would be left alone with the deck of cards, and my choice was either play patience or, as a kid, create stories out of the face cards. So like the Knave of Hearts was always the naughty one, that's why I've started with him. But like the Queen of Hearts would have like an epic love story, and she'd have fallen in love with like the King of Spades, but the King of Clubs was jealous, so he would like try and kill the King of Spades. And I'd sit there and I'd sort of tell myself stories about the cards as if they were characters. And so I think that kind of, I've never really, every time I play a game of cards and I like get one of the face cards, I'm like, haha, we meet again. And I think when I started writing and I was like, I want to incorporate that kind of childlike sort of recognition with a deck of cards, how can I incorporate that into the story? And then I was like, well, I want mythical beings, because I love drawing mythical beings, and I want a bit of steampunk in there because I like drawing Victoriana stuff. And then you know, and again, I love Sandman. I've also been reading a web comic called Lore Olympus, which is a retelling of the story of Persephone and Hades, and them falling in love, and her like going to the underworld and stuff, like from Greek god mythology. And I actually studied ancient history at school, so like ancient Greeks, ancient Romans, all that sort of stuff. I love that kind of, again, because I've always thought if there is gods and goddesses, there must be more than one, because the world is too much of a mess for it to be one dude that's got a plan. For me, it's always like, you know, these are a bunch of people that are trying to get it right and maybe screwing it up, or, you know, or maybe there's some vindictive ones in there, because like, you know, kids get cancer. That's a vindictive god going on right there. So it kind of played into a little bit of my own belief system, although I will caveat I am pagan, so I don't kind of sit in the kind of Christian religion-y type thing. So, but it was like, okay, so paganism basically means belief in like many gods, you don't have any structure, and you love nature. And I was like, and I want to kind of play with that a little bit. And no disrespect to anyone that does believe in God, like, you know, whatever gets you through the mess that is life, you crack on. But I was just like, I want to have fun with that kind of belief system, and kind of the idea that deities are not infallible sits better with me. I think that they're probably all trying, but all pulling in different directions, and that's what's causing the mess. And then I'm not going to reveal too much about like the overall story arc, but like, you know, they bicker. And in my comic, a lot of the mess is created because people can't agree. Gods can't agree with what should or shouldn't be happening. And I just, yeah, that sort of concept really sort of spoke to me. Thus the comic was born.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Good. So I was gonna ask, what was the that moment that sparked everything, where you were just sitting down and going, that light bulb went off, and you started from there?
I think it was definitely post COVID. I think that the real light bulb of, oh crap, I think I have something that's actually worth putting out, I think was when I finished the cover art for issue 1, because I did the cover before I'd finished the issue. In fact, I think I'd only fully drawn about 6 pages of issue 1 when I drew the cover. And I think when I drew the cover, and it was the first piece of art I'd drawn, because I'm one of these people where if you will come around my house, there is none of my art on the walls. I can't bear to look at my own artwork because I sit and I pick it to pieces. And it was the first time I'd drawn something where I was like, I don't want to pick at it. Yeah, okay, that's a lie. These days I do want to pick at it. But when I first drew it, I was like, on second it, I was like, actually, that's pretty. I would probably read that comic. I would probably just and I know like you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but that's a nice cover that I've drawn. I'm quite pleased with that cover.
No, it is.
And yeah, and like it was the first time I'd sort of managed to draw a head tilted back properly, and I'd never drawn a throne before, and I got to kind of like, I had to use like lots of references and stuff so it didn't look just like garbage. And actually that's probably the 4th iteration of the cover that I ended up with. I'd drawn like a couple of other versions, and there was one that nearly made the cut, and then I started drawing this and I was like, this is a much stronger composition. And just, I think, yeah, when that cover art was done, I was like, do you know what, this is probably a real comic. This probably isn't just me prattling around. I probably could release this and at least like 3 people will read it. Just based on the cover alone. But obviously also it meant the cover set the standard for the rest of the comic. So what I didn't want to happen is someone open up the cover and then the rest of the art is garbage, because that is just, you know, and I get it, like sometimes people will hire a cover artist and it's a different internal, like, you know, that you physically can't make it the same standard, because like I spent about 6 weeks drawing that cover. If I spent 6 weeks drawing every single page of the thing, like, you know, it's 3-4 years for me to finish it. So I get it, speed and just kind of what you're trying to draw means that's not possible. But it meant that I kind of went back through the comic and raised the standard of a lot of the pages just based on that cover. And I think that was the sort of, I could do this properly, you know, let's do it. Let's give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? And yeah, that was a nice moment. Yeah. And obviously like my family were like, yeah, that looks pretty good, which in my family speak is like, nice. Yeah. And even my daughter, who is like not my strongest critic, but she was like, that's really good, Mummy. I was like, yeah, the preteen says it's good. Amazing.
The Queen of Knives is beautiful. Any where did you get your inspiration? It's perfect.
I think it was, have you watched the TV show Arcane?
Yes.
So it's one that's, if you haven't, and if you've got Netflix, it's one of my all-time favorite TV shows now, because it is beautifully animated and the story is amazing and the characters are amazing. But anyway, there is a character in that TV show who is this very strong woman who, like, you know, you get to see a bit of her backstory and why she is the way she is. But like, I just loved her character. I just thought that she was this powerful woman who was slightly flawed for various, like, you know, she comes across as power hungry, but actually there's a really good reason behind it. And that's kind of, I wanted my Queen of Hearts, who is Aphrodite. That's kind of her deity name, if you like, but she's known as the Queen of Hearts. And I really, I just thought, like, what a powerful figure. And I really wanted, like, I want my gods to be diverse. I don't want it to just be a bunch of white people. motoring through. So I wanted to make
Nah, that was
sure that
dope.
like I included like, because these are supposed to be gods that represent everybody. So I kind of wanted to make sure that there was like, you know, someone that, you know, there's a little girl out there that wants someone to represent her, and I'm like, how cool would it be is if her representation could be this super powerful Aphrodite who's like the most, she's like, you know, the epitome of beauty and strength. So that's what I wanted to channel, and I think with the cover I was successful, and she appears a lot more in issue 2, and I want to make sure I kind of do her the honor, like, you know, make sure that I've drawn her to that quality, so that, like, you know, she always looks like the most elegant, beautiful, and sort of strong woman in the room. Like, that's kind of what I want to channel with her.
Yeah, but you definitely achieved that with that cover.
Thank you.
Yeah, she is. Woo.
Thank you.
Outfit and all, little bows. You know, I'm just all nice. Don't worry. I ain't gonna do
but with the
nothing
suit
to
of
you.
armor, like, she will kick your ass.
Yeah, I ain't gonna do nothing. Twirl her hair. I ain't gonna do nothing.
And then pow, right in the kiss.
Word.
Exactly. Yeah, don't mess with the Queen of Hearts. Like, she is, yeah, she's formidable, but also, like, you know, not the bad guy, I guess. I'm trying really hard to kind of phrase it so I don't like give away bits of issue 2, but yeah, you get to understand a little bit more where she's coming from and why she's doing what she's doing in issue 2. Yeah, I'm so excited when that's done.
So,
only a year to go.
that was my next question. Do you have a due date?
Oh, I'm aiming for early next year at the moment. So I've issue 2's covers drawn. I've done most of the splash pages. It's just the internal artwork that needs doing because the script's now written. It will need an editor to look at it at some point to make sure I've not done anything silly. But yeah, I'm aiming for early next year. But I do have a few health problems and I might have to have a little bit of surgery. And if that happens, it might delay it further. So I'm trying not to pin myself to a date because health comes first. Yeah, you can never quite predict the future, so I've been told. But yeah, I'm aiming for early 2024. But I will be working on it flat out because I don't think I can help myself. This is my little setup here with my drawing tablet, which is just here. This is my happy place. This is kind of, if I've had a bad day at work, this is where I come to kind of escape from the world and just delve into my comic and shout a lot when I can't draw a curtain like going a certain way, or I haven't quite got the perspective right. I've had a few of those where I've finished what I think I finished the page and I look at it and go, that is a wonky looking room. But I kind of like getting lost. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. So yeah, so it early 2024. In hindsight, I probably should have waited to release issue 1 until I was a bit closer to the end, but I also thought, it's done, get it out there.
Yeah,
what's
like
the worst that could happen? I'm not tied to a publisher. I can put stuff out when I need to. As I have a Patreon where people can follow the journey. I don't know what it equates to in dollars, but it's like the minimum tier is £1 a month, and that gives you access to all the behind the scenes. And I try and post weekly with kind of, this is the page I'm working on. This is the garbage that it looks like when I start. And then the next week it's like, it looks a little bit less like garbage. And then the week after that, you can start to actually tell that that's a person that you've drawn. And then the week after that, okay, that's looking more like the internal art we're used to. So you can kind of follow my process through that. And obviously I'm on Facebook and Instagram and stuff, and I do like post little sneaky peeks of what I'm working on, and I'm trying to get better at remembering to do that, because I think, as I said, sometimes I can do the promotion bit, but I forget to because I'm so busy making. I kind of don't. I then forget to tell anyone I'm still making it. I'm still here, still working. Soz. If I can get it out any earlier, I will. But I think that may be wishful thinking, as it's just little old me.
We commend you because we all go through it. We're creators. Yeah. We have lives, and we have to do it around. We can't just stop what we need to do. We need to live.
It's the pesky full-time job that pays the bills, really.
Yeah. We all go through it, so we know. Yeah. Don't worry.
Yeah. I was mentioning that when we went off air on Thursday. It's like, if all of us didn't have jobs, the amount of stuff we'll be able to do for this podcast is great.
Lots and sleep if I didn't need those.
Yeah.
I'm picking on gas, but yeah, sadly, both are required in my life to keep the lights on and keep children fed, and my many cats. I didn't realize how expensive having 4 cats was until I got 4 cats.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and they got expensive tasting cat food. So
What is this?
oh god,
Where
yeah,
is my great poupon?
My fancy feast.
If it's not the fancy stuff, they just they bring me dead things until I provide the fancy stuff. So, and sometimes it's not dead because we live in the countryside here in England, and we've had rabbits, live rabbits. I've been chasing a live wild rabbit around my living room before. Partridge.
Oh my god.
I was on a conference call at work, and one of them let a partridge out on my laptop. Oh my god, that's horrible.
Oh no!
Bats, frogs, all of it. So if you feed them well, they don't tend to hunt as much. So we're like, ugh, expensive cat food, but that means we don't have to deal with wild animals in the middle of the night running around our house. So
right.
I will pay that.
Hey, gladly.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you have the world's greatest hunters.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I swear they hunt as a pack.
She doesn't feed us
if you've ever owned a cat, the thought of any of them doing anything together is hilarious, because herding cats would be an issue.
We have a cat now, but our original cat, when we used to live in our house, their neighbor dug up his basement, hit a rat nest, sent mice everywhere.
Yeah,
I thought my cat was crazy, because she used to, you'd wake up, find a little mouse, but it'd be completely gutted. It's just the skin. It's like, what did you do to this thing?
Great poupon.
Nothing wrong.
My fattest cat, who's a cat called Kupo, because again I'm a Final Fantasy fan.
Great name.
He likes to bring whatever mouse he's fat, and he's too fat to hunt. So this is a mouse he found. But he will drag his little fat bottom up the stairs, dragging what is probably a mouse that one of the other cats brought in, and he'll sit and he'll eat it next to my bed, and you can hear it's like, and then all he'll leave is what we call the mouse pips, which is probably I think the liver is poisonous to cats, so cats will always spit the liver out, and it's just this little pip that's left next to the bed. And sometimes you get up to pee in the middle of the night and you step in something and you're like, oh my god,
great poupon.
Oh no,
You should have got me the
have I just stood on a tiny liver?
Yeah. I left that for you.
You should have got me the fancy feast like I told you.
Yeah, you kind of look at him and go, I know it's a gift, but you really shouldn't have. But I love them. They are my fur babies. But yeah, if I could change one thing, it would be just to make it so that they were really, really crap hunters, or that Kupo was really crap at stealing stuff from the other cats. Because bless him, he's a chonk.
He's smart. I ain't moving. What you got over there? Oh, that's nice. Let me see.
Yeah. Well, I've been told that I shouldn't really fat shame the cat, but I don't think he cares.
Yeah, I don't think they know English that well.
No. Although sometimes he does give me are you talking about how round I am again? I am not pleased with this. This is not the service I've come to expect.
Wait until one of them. Right, I'm bringing it straight to you.
Yeah.
And so I have a dreaded question for the first issue here. Do you have a favorite panel, or is it like being a parent where you can't just pick one?
See, every time someone asks me this, the answer is yes, but it changes frequently depending on what I've drawn recently. So there is a page, and actually let me see if I can pull it up on my thing, and I'll hold the little thing up. But there's one page in particular. It started out as the page I hated the most in the comic. And after my editor had gone through the script and I kind of reread the script again, I redrew the whole page and it became my favorite page in the comic. So, and I love it when a page kind of rotates, but I don't know if you'll be able to see, but it's this one.
Yeah. He's going to zoom. Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, I have. Hold on.
You might have that one. I think that's one of the ones I sent over. Yes, it's why. And yeah, when I first drew it, a lot of the panels, I think it only had it had 3 panels on it, and it was quite a blah page, and I I didn't like some of the angles I'd used, but the adding the eye sort of panel in the top, the sort of the actual contemplation panel, I guess you'd call it. It's the first time I felt sort of in command of kind of the pacing of her speech, whereas before it had been like she, like, you know, in fact it was just one giant speech bubble that had all the text like in the sort of the top couple of panels. And for me, it didn't flow properly. It didn't kind of represent what would actually be happening if you were having that conversation with her. So I think at the moment, this is my favorite page. But I think if you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, it probably would have been, I really enjoyed drawing that. So there's a monster attack. Oh, hello, cat. Thank you. This isn't the fat one. This is
Where's
the dumb
my
one.
fancy food?
Oh, he's sopping wet. Oh,
I have a treat for
oh,
you.
Moogle, what are you doing?
If you don't feed me now, I'm bringing a snake in here.
Yeah, well, he just likes to stick his little bum in the face. I mean, I know it's a sign of affection in cats, but it's not. Oh,
That is enough.
Christ, cat. Oh.
He is in command.
I'm just going to try and ignore him. But yeah, I'm trying. I think the monster attack page was really good fun to draw. Dude, you're stepping on all the keys. Was really good fun to draw. And I hadn't drawn a monster before. I know it sounds like really silly, but all the artwork I'd ever done before was usually sort of, hang on, Bucker. Google. So he's just like, do not save that page. Well, no, he just, so the one I just held up, he just like click delete and delete the whole layer. No kitty. Oh, stupid cat. Anyway, but yeah, I think the monster, the sort of the skull page, as I call it, that was really good fun to draw because I'd not drawn anything like it before. Because as I said, I am a bit of a weenie and I like to kind of have rainbows and unicorns all around me. And it was like, actually, I need to draw something that isn't
so cute.
Yeah, I need to draw something with a bit of teeth to it. So I googled a lot of pictures of skulls, and then I was like, well, I'd want it to have like big fangs and stuff. So so that was like a page I really enjoyed drawing. And I think there's one. I love drawing people and I love drawing like things, but I'm not a massive background person. Like if you want me to paint a landscape, I'll probably look at you with a very dead facial expression and be like, do I have to? That's sad. So I think there was a one where Tobias is walking out of the venue and it is like he's in it. There is a figure in it, but he's tiny. Most of the picture is actually more, I think of it as like an architecture type drawing where it's more about the building, which was an important one to kind of so you could picture where they were performing. But I actually ended up really liking that page once I'd finished drawing it. It was kind of whilst I was doing it, it was like, oh my God, if I have to draw another roof tile, I'm going to blow my brains out. But actually the end result was actually I really like, you know, I am picturing that place because I've drawn that, and that was quite a nice feeling. But I still think the one that you've picked out, I think that is my favorite because I went back and drew that once the comic was finished and it felt like I actually knew what I was doing to some degree. And that was a pretty awesome feeling.
When I'm getting better moment.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
When you're drawing to make that conversation, how do you like? Are there rules to set the panels for the flow, or you just?
I'm sure there probably are, but I don't know what they are.
And I don't care.
I kind of just go with if I can read the page back and I can follow what's happening, I've just got to hope that other people also follow what's happening. And I do know that it can be sometimes with any comic that you're reading quite hard to work out which panel you're supposed to read next. So when I do that, I kind of read it the way I would read it naturally. And that seems all right. And it kind of flows. And like, it's things like if someone's having to pause to think in a sentence, do I capture that pause, or actually is that pause important? Can I just kind of have them continuing to rattle on? Because people do naturally pause when they're talking to breathe. And it's kind of, is that moment of pause important? And like in the panel that came up, when I redrew it, I was like, actually, it is a significant pause because she's deciding whether to reveal like to pull the curtain back or not to what is essentially a bunch of mortals that really should have no business knowing how this all works. So that is like, that's a poignant moment for her to kind of, that one there. And it's kind of like, she's quite a blasé character. I mean, if anything, she's probably the character in it that has my voice, like my pure voice. Like I've not tried to sort of channel anybody else. She speaks as me, and her way of speaking is, in my head anyway, my voice, which is like, I'm sure really self-indulgent and stuff, but it made her the easiest character to write for, because I'm like, well, what would I say in that situation? Because I'm me and I'm quite good at knowing how I operate generally most of the time. Whereas with all the other characters, it's like, okay, I have to look back at their lore or whatever it is that I've kind of put together for them, or think about my interactions with them. So where it's band members, where I've spoken to them or I've seen them talking in interviews and stuff, how would they kind of interpret that scene? And it was like, I think even she's someone that doesn't take it too seriously. And again, I'm not going to give it away, but she's got good reason to not take it seriously because of things that have happened to her involving the gods. And I think having that sort of knowledge, and I'm not going to reveal it, she does have a very important identity that will be revealed in later issues. I don't think it'll even come out in issue 2. It's probably we're looking issue 3 or issue 4 that I want to kind of pull that little nugget out as like a reveal. And it's cool because I can put nods to that information that I know. It's like, I know, nobody else knows. And I can kind of dip that in. I can kind of start to feed that in through her dialogue and the way she reacts to certain situations. And that was the first time I felt like I could do that. And I had some of, and again, I'm not an expert by any means, but it was like, I've learned that as I've gone through this journey of really kind of putting that amount of thought into what somebody is doing and what's also going to look good on the page. Because out of all the pages, I find that one quite fun to look at. Sometimes you can't get away with, sometimes you have to have a blah page, because if they're all like, you sort of almost get fatigue, I think, or at least I do when I'm reading comics. Like I've read a lot of indie comics where it's really good, but the pages are almost so busy, you kind of have to pick it up. You sort of look at a couple of pages and have a little rest and then go back again, because it's so hard to follow what's going on with the story because there's so much going on the page. And I was like, I need to accept that some of my pages, they're not going to be blah. It's like the filler episodes in a TV show. You need them to tell the story. And I need to let go of the fact that they all have to be like these pizzazz pages. And I think making my peace with that as well sort of means that I can have favorite pages as opposed to being like, oh, they're all brilliant, or oh, they're all crap. So yeah, that's, I'm sure I've gone off on a tangent there because I do get overexcited when I talk about my comics.
You had the stage, you had the mic. You are our guest.
I do feel like I'm like hogging it.
You're answering future questions that we have, so it's just like, go ahead.
We're here with you. I'm getting questions as you talk. Don't worry about it. Continue to talk. I might answer them.
You can tell me to be like, Sarah, just pause for air.
No, but we're getting a lot more information, because when you described how you would do the characters, it's like you made the lore for each character, and you can definitely see each character has its own personality. Instead of trying to, like what Cap said earlier, trying to create a character and be like, well, this one's gonna do this time, and that one's gonna do this one. It's like, all right, no, we know the character. You know the characters inside out. So it's like, in this situation, character A has to do this because that's who he is, and then this one has to react that way. So it's dope to see that.
Well, I don't know. Oh, sorry. You carry on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if you guys have it when you're creating, but you do feel a little bit like, oh my God, there's all these voices. I've got all these characters sat in my head and they're all like yabbering away. And when you're writing, it's more, what crazy situation can I put these characters into, as opposed to what would this character do? For me, it's more what's going to happen and how the characters react. And this is going to make me sound like unhinged, but it's like, come on then, Knave, what would you do in this situation? Is kind of what's going on in my head. Is like, I've decided what's going to happen, but it's only when I start to really get into the drawing and the nitty gritty that it kind of, the characters almost tell me what they want, what they would do in that situation. That sounds really weird, but that's how when I'm writing, that's how I think about it, is I'm going to write or when I'm plotting out a thing, it's like, I just bullet point, this is what's going to happen. And then the story kind of writes itself because the characters will then, so it's like, so in this one, metal band, problems with gigs, meet stranger, have some of it explained, slight cliffhanger. And it was kind of, I started out really with those bullet points of just X is going to happen, then Y is going to happen, then Z is going to happen, then A is going to happen, then B is going to happen. And I know that these characters are all inside out. So if I plop them into this situation with a sword or whatever, what are they going to do? What are they going to do when those situations happen? And that makes writing easy for me. I know that everyone has their own style of writing, and I don't think there is like a definitive way that anyone writes or creates, because I think everybody has different experiences, different skill sets, all that sort of stuff. But that's kind of what works for me is I'm going to write what's going to happen, and then the characters are going to tell me what they're going to do, and that's what's going to build the rest of the story for me. And it's like, it's great because it's lazy. I don't have to think. My characters are going to do all that for me. I'm just going to like the touch paper.
and it seems so more realistic. Because I'm trying to think of a video for a future podcast, like a little promotion for that. So I made a little script because I wanted the other guys involved. So I'm sitting here going, all right, how would show come in on this? And then I would say something like, all right, this is I've said this before to show this is how he responds. So this is what I'm going to say. So he could say it and it'll come out natural. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, it's like you're writing for other people. Like, all right, so how does this guy do it? And it seems better because then when you actually have other people read it, it's like, okay, I know that show would say this. It's not like some like I'm not making show speak proper English because that's not what he comes in with the funny comment.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
See, I know if I said something like that, he's coming in with the wait a minute. So if I ever wrote a script and I said something crazy, he comes in the wait a minute. Why me? You know? Yeah. So.
Yeah, and sometimes your characters will do something unexpected. In some of the other things I've written for later issues, I've sort of written it, and then I've kind of gone, okay, so this is what they probably do, but what happens if they do this? Because people are unpredictable, right? So I also like having, again, I am aware that this sounds slightly unhinged, but it's like sometimes my characters do things I don't expect. And then that's quite fun to write around and draw around. Or I'll have written it one way, and then when I'm drawing, I'll just have scribbled something. I'm like, actually, that looks a little bit like the character's doing this, which is not what I would have actually made them do. But looking at that looks quite cool. I'm going to go with it. And let's, and then the trick is to remember that is a potential way that they would react to something, and make sure that you have that kind of filed away again in my little notepad about each character. To kind of say, in this situation, you would expect them to do this, but actually they'll do this. And that means that they are unhinged, and that's going to be really fun to bring in later on, or that this is obviously a trigger for this character that makes them act unexpectedly. Because I think if your characters always act predictably, they're less believable, whereas if every now and then you just make them do something like nuts, I think people like that's more human. And I think people respond to that, whereas I think if a character becomes too linear and almost like a parody of themselves, and I've read, I won't say I've read many comics where that happens, but I have read books where that's happened, where they become almost a parody of what the author was probably trying to do. And I'm not going to name authors because that's mean, but I've sort of read it and gone, this is a great book then for helping me go to sleep because I know what's going to happen next. And it makes the character less interesting. So I think, I like the idea that my characters are going to keep me on my toes every now and then, because they're going to do something like a little bit weird that is like, and that will usually be the little bit weird thing will normally be I'll be sat on the train or somewhere inappropriate, and I'll suddenly go, oh my God, I can make them do this because I am a puppet master. I like that freedom. I really like that freedom to kind of play with it's like playing Barbie dolls, isn't it? It's like this Barbie doll is now going to go off to the shops, and this Barbie doll is going to have like smash everything in their room because she wanted to go to the shops and can't. So it's like, I think it all comes back to like having a big imagination as a kid. I'm just a big kid that's been given a drawing pad and and a Kindle direct publishing account.
I completely understand that. Yeah, I'm admittedly a coward when it comes to like wanting to write or do my own comic or do my own thing. That's why I play D&D, because I can get my creative outlet. But I do that exact same thing before a session. I put myself in as many different scenarios to see how my character would react, and then show up. We had a whole session where it was so my character, I don't know if you're familiar with these terms, but it is a bard. So
Yep,
he's the guy
yep.
who's all right. So he's a bard. We had an entire 3-hour session in which, going into it, this was not the plan, but there was an opportunity to do like a concert to get money and to win a battle of the bands. So I'm literally in my friend's house for 3 hours singing Smashing Pumpkins, Backstreet Boys, just any song I could think of, trying to outdo the other group that was there. All because that's, you prepare as much as you can, but then you just go where the
Go with the
story
flow.
takes you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the best stories are, there'll be like not boundaries, but there'll be like a bit of structure, and then you can go to town around it. I think that's, for me, that's my comfort zone, is a little bit of structure, but then total freedom.
Yeah.
And if I don't have the structure, I tend to go off in so many tangents. It's a bit like podcasts where I've got people that are like asking me questions. It's great, because I tried twitching at one point, and it was lovely. I was really unproductive. I didn't get much artwork done, and I would just go off on tangents and forget what I was saying. Whereas in this, like, you guys have been really lovely, and it makes it much easier because you're my structure. You're the ones that are kind of going, okay, she's obviously like gone off down this rabbit hole, and we need to bring her back here. So here's a question. Oh, she's back in the room. Well done. And I think I work well with that. A little bit of structure, and then just run with it.
Well, we're used to that because we go on tangents all the time.
Oh, good.
we were previewing the Guardians of the Galaxy on Tuesday, and then me and Cap got into an argument for like an hour and a half, and then it was like, all right, let's get back to where we were going. Yeah, we'll veer off course real quick and go, guys, we're going the opposite direction. Can we get back to where we was going? It's like, all right, and then we slide and then curve and then go right back into another tangent. So yeah, we're used to that.
You're used to that. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to my brain.
Well, I mean, you've been a lovely guest for us. Most people will ask a question and they'll do it was hard.
Oh.
And we're like, shit.
Quick.
Okay,
Quick.
I was gonna expand on what you said, but what's your favorite color? So you going into detail was definitely.
Oh, that's right. Well, I like
awesome.
talking about this stuff, and my husband's lovely, but he's not into comics, so I don't get to talk about it that much at home. So it's really nice to have like people to share with. So thank you so much for having me.
It was our pleasure to have you, and we'll give you the camera. Would you like to pitch your IG, Facebook, where they could get you?
Yeah, this is where I have to remember. This is why I'm so rubbish. I'm so rubbish at the self-promotion. But
I do
Patreon.
the same thing.
Yeah, Patreon is definitely like that's where I regularly post with updates on how I'm doing. So I think you've kindly put that in the comments. So
yes.
patreon.com/rustedsilver. And I am Rusted Silver Art, I think. Yeah, Rusted Silver Art on Instagram. And I am Rusted Silver, the Art of Sarah Webb on Facebook. And I think that's everywhere. Oh, I'm on TikTok as well, but I'm a real noob when it comes to TikTok. So maybe give me a few months, then come and find me on TikTok. But actually, knaveofheartscomic.com is my comic books website, and all of my socials are on there. So that is a good place to check for everything to do with my comic, including links to all my socials, because I'm aware I have given not enough information for anyone to find me. And I'm trying to think what else. I'm on Amazon. Go to Amazon and buy my comic, pretty please. Or if you've got Kindle Unlimited, it is free on Kindle Unlimited, because I just want people to be able to read this thing. So yeah, go find there, and then you can read it for free if you're a Kindle Unlimited person. And yeah, thank you for having me so much. It's been so much fun.
You're awesome. You're awesome.
Thank you.
I learned so much. I do have a personal question for you, and I'm sorry
Of
about.
course.
I was listening
That's
to
all right.
you, and I wrote it down. Are you ever planning on going hunting or just plastic?
Oh, so I think in the UK you're not allowed to shoot the live animals because most of them are protected. So
Okay.
I don't think I'd ever go. Well, I certainly wouldn't do it here in the UK. I think if I had to eat because of apocalypse, yes, I
Yeah.
will do it. I don't really like the idea of hunting for sport. That I don't know. It just doesn't like if you're doing it because you're going to eat the animal. Fair enough. Like, you know, it's no different than you going to the butcher shop. But if you're just doing it because you want to see a little squeaky thing die, I don't like that idea. So no, for me, I love my bow. My bow is beautiful, and the plastic animals had it coming. So I'm quite comfortable shooting that. And for me, it's more about accuracy and being down the woods. That's like my two sort of like, you know, the satisfying thunk when you actually hit the target and I'm in the woods. I think unless I actually needed to, I wouldn't be someone that would ever hunt for sport.
Awesome.
If that makes sense.
Curiosity. No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
One
No, I
final
don't mind
question.
personal questions.
One final question. I'm not a bowman, but do you use a standard bow or like a compound bow?
I use an American flat bow is my bow of choice. In fact, David Bowie, who I don't use anymore because he's a bit weedy now, is right here. Hang on. Oh, come on, down you come. So this is Mr. David Bowie.
She got
Okay.
the aria. She got the.
Yeah, and he was my first sort of proper flat bow, a recurve, and then I can't reach my other one because my husband's put it up there, and I'm a short, stubby person. But yeah, Mr. Bojangles is he's a bit more powerful, so I actually have some hope of hitting the far away targets because before with Mr. Bowie, I could get the ones that were like a few feet away, but the ones that were kind of more than 20 feet, it was like I'd have to shoot about sort of 700 meters in the air for it to maybe land just in front of the target. So
awesome. That's awesome.
Okay. So Joseph said, I love this one. Y'all made my day at work so much better. Thank you.
oh, thank you, Joseph.
And we have the website up in the chat. Also, give that a try. Then you can find all of her
Find all
comics
the
there.
bits.
Yes, find all the details, the socials and all that other stuff. But like I said, appreciate you coming on. We would love to have you back on and talk about comics, you know, and Marvel.
Yeah, when I'm getting close to issue 2 being done,
Yes.
I would love to come on and show you guys how that's getting on. That would be great.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that's it for now. Thanks for coming on the special Saturday show of the Knucklehead Comics. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, it is your friendly neighborhood Knucklehead signing out. Peace, everybody.
Bye.